At 0230 hours on October 25, 1944, Commander Richard O'Kane stood on the bridge of USS Tang as two torpedoes streaked into the dark waters of the Formosa Strait, one running straight toward a crippled Japanese cargo ship and the other, its gyroscope failing, arcing into a lethal circle that would come back for the submarine that had made history in less than a year of war. O'Kane, just 33 years old, a Naval Academy graduate of the class of 1934, had commanded Tang for only 11 months, and in that time across 4 brutal war patrols, his boat had sunk more ships than any submarine in the entire Pacific Fleet, a shocking achievement for a weapon system the Navy's surface admirals had long dismissed as useless, obsolete, and unfit for modern war. Before World War II, senior officers like Admiral William Leahy argued that submarines were a waste of resources, calling them sewer pipes and declaring in 1937 that they had no future in naval warfare, while others insisted subs had value only for reconnaissance or coastal defense because they supposedly lacked the range, firepower, and endurance to operate across a Pacific the size of an oceanic continent. When O'Kane graduated from submarine school in 1938, many of his classmates wondered why any ambitious officer would volunteer for a branch where careers went to die, a service that received no glory, commanded no prestige, and was largely ignored by the battleship and carrier admirals who shaped naval doctrine. But O'Kane believed submarines possessed one capability that capital ships could never match: the ability to approach unseen, strike without warning, and vanish before the enemy could respond, whereas a battleship announced itself over the horizon and a carrier depended on weather, daylight, and aircraft that required vast logistical support. The surface admirals dismissed his view, pointing to World War I, where German U-boats had devastated merchant shipping without changing the war's outcome, and insisted that sonar, escorts, and convoys made subs ineffective. Still, the United States had built submarines, 111 by 1941, but built them for scouting, not commerce raiding, because sinking merchants was considered ungentlemanly and beneath American honor, suitable for Germans, not Americans. So peacetime doctrine assigned submarines to locating enemy fleets rather than destroying their supply lines. By December 1941, only 2% of the Navy wore dolphins, and only 16,000 men would serve on submarines during the entire war, a tiny, overlooked minority among the Navy's 284,000 personnel. In those early days, the submarine force suffered from institutional neglect, defective doctrine, and worst of all, the catastrophic failure of the Mark 14 torpedo, a weapon designed on paper to be the most advanced torpedo in the world, 3,280 pounds, a 663-pound warhead, 46 knots over 4,600 yards, but in reality plagued by 4 deadly defects. It ran 10 feet deeper than set, its magnetic exploder detonated prematurely or not at all, its contact exploder crushed itself on impact, and its gyroscope could fail, sending the torpedo into a fatal circular run. These flaws went undiscovered because the Bureau of Ordnance refused to test live warheads, claiming torpedoes were too expensive to waste, using only dummy heads with incorrect hydrodynamics, and when commanders reported failures in combat, the Bureau blamed them instead of the weapon. O'Kane would learn firsthand the consequences of that arrogance when he served as executive officer of USS Argonaut near Midway during Pearl Harbor and later aboard USS Wahoo under Dudley "Mush" Morton, where he helped build the aggressive tactics that rewrote submarine warfare. Morton and O'Kane operated like two halves of a single mind, Morton commanding from the conning tower, O'Kane running the attack from the control room. And together they demonstrated that submarines should strike like wolves, not hide like prey, attacking on the surface at night, closing to point-blank range where even defective torpedoes had a chance of detonating, and pursuing damaged ships relentlessly until they disappeared beneath the waves. Wahoo sank 20 ships in 6 patrols, but even she suffered torpedo failures, including 10 defective shots on her 6th patrol, and Morton's detailed complaints were ignored just like every other commander's as torpedoes ran deep, exploded early, or failed entirely. Eventually, submarine officers began disabling the magnetic exploder without authorization, an action that could have brought court-martial but saved countless lives. By mid-1943, after enormous pressure from fleet commanders, the Bureau of Ordnance finally admitted the depth mechanism was miscalibrated, then reluctantly accepted that the magnetic exploder had to be deactivated fleet-wide, though the contact exploder remained fatally flawed until USS Tang's Lawrence Daspit returned an unexploded torpedo to Pearl Harbor, proving the firing pin was too weak. Only in September 1943, nearly 2 years into the war, did submarines finally receive reliable weapons. In October that same year, O'Kane was given command of USS Tang, a Belau-class submarine capable of diving to 400 feet, deeper than most Japanese depth charges were set, though the crushing pressure at that depth strained the hull, popped rivets, and terrified inexperienced sailors. Tang's crew of 87 lived in a cramped, hot, noisy steel tube designed for 66 men. Sleeping in shifts, showering once a week for 30 seconds, eating good food only during the first days of patrol before canned rations took over, and surviving on 4 hours of sleep between 6-hour watches. But O'Kane drilled them relentlessly. Emergency procedures, torpedo reloads, diving, surfacing, fire control, until they were the fastest crew in the Pacific, reloading in 6 to 8 minutes instead of 15. Calculating firing solutions faster than the torpedo data computer thanks to prodigies like Frank Springer, and identifying ships on radar alone thanks to radioman Floyd Caverly. Tang's first patrol in January 1944 sank 5 ships, her second in April sank 4, her third in June sank 6, her fourth in August sank 10, making O'Kane the most successful submarine commander in American history by September 1944. His success came from aggressive surface attacks at night, point-blank torpedo shots, relentless pursuit, and an instinctive understanding of geometry and timing that allowed him to position Tang ahead of convoys in the dark, unseen until it was too late. Japan, which began the war with 6 million tons of merchant shipping essential for transporting oil, rice, rubber, iron, coal, and troops from conquered territories to the home islands, found its lifelines under constant attack and unrestricted submarine warfare, authorized by Admiral Charles Lockwood, meant any Japanese ship except hospital or neutral vessels could be sunk on sight because Japanese captains radioed submarines' positions and refused to stop when challenged. During Tang's fifth and final patrol, beginning September 24, 1944, O'Kane entered the deadly Formosa Strait, a narrow, shallow, heavily patrolled corridor where every ship bound for the Philippines had to pass as Japan rushed reinforcements to counter MacArthur's impending invasion. It was a choke point filled with danger, air patrols from both coasts, constant escorts, sonar sweeps, but also rich with targets. Over 2 weeks O'Kane employed every tactic he had perfected, sinking tankers, transports, and cargo ships. Critical to Japan's defense of the Philippines, enduring depth charge attacks that shattered light bulbs, slammed men into bulkheads, and left Tang lurking silently at 400 feet while escorts searched above. By October 24, Tang had fired nearly all her torpedoes and achieved extraordinary results. That night, radar detected another convoy, and with only a few torpedoes left, O'Kane maneuvered brilliantly, sinking ships in the darkness north of Turnabout Island. At 0230 on October 25, firing his final 2 torpedoes at a damaged cargo ship, fate intervened. The second torpedo curved into its fatal circular run. O'Kane watched its phosphorescent wake arc through the water, ordered a hard turn at flank speed, but Tang was too large and too slow to escape. The torpedo slammed into her stern, obliterating the maneuvering room and after torpedo room, killing men instantly and flooding compartments as Tang pitched upward, her stern sinking and her bow rising like a spear in the sea. O'Kane and 8 others were thrown from the bridge into the water while 78 men were trapped inside as Tang slid to the bottom at 180 feet. In the forward torpedo room 9 survivors attempted to escape using Momsen lungs. Knowing 180 feet was deeper than most had ever tried, the pressure immense, the ascent long and deadly if done too fast or too slow, they flooded the escape trunk, equalized pressure, opened the outer hatch, and swam upward through black water toward a surface they could not see. 5 survived the climb, joining O'Kane and 3 others who had survived topside long enough to be captured by Japanese escorts who initially mistook them for their own sailors. Once the guards realized they were Americans, the brutality began. Beatings, starvation, confinement in spaces too small to lie down, transfer to a Funa interrogation center where Geneva protections did not apply. Interrogations demanding sonar and radar secrets, more beatings, more starvation, and finally, relocation to a Mori prison camp in Tokyo Bay, a disease-ridden, freezing, overcrowded compound where rations were 800 calories a day, men died of dysentery, beriberi, pneumonia, and malnutrition, and where Jesse da Silva, one of Tang's survivors, finally succumbed after surviving the sinking and escape. O'Kane blamed himself helplessly, unable to save his men. And by the time Allied forces liberated the camp in August 1945, he weighed just 88 pounds, unable to walk without assistance. But alive, Tang's 5 patrols had sunk 33 ships totaling 116,454 tons, the greatest tonnage of any American submarine in the war, and on March 27, 1946, O'Kane received the Medal of Honor from President Truman for his unmatched leadership and courage. After the war he continued serving, helping develop Cold War submarine tactics and training new commanders before retiring as a captain in 1957 with advancement to Rear Admiral. Meanwhile, the submarine force he helped validate, just 2% of the Navy, had sunk 30% of Japan's entire fleet, destroying 1,113 merchant ships and 201 warships including 8 carriers, 1 battleship, and 11 cruisers, while suffering the highest casualty rate in the U.S. military with 52 submarines and 3,505 men lost. But their impact was decisive because Japan depended utterly on imported oil, iron, coal, rice, and rubber, and when submarines choked off those supply lines, Japan's Navy, Air Force, factories, transportation network, and civilian population collapsed. Oil imports fell from 50 million barrels to 0, the combined fleet was immobilized, pilots received almost no training, aircraft production plummeted, civilians starved on 1,200 calories per day, and by 1945 mass starvation loomed. Post-war surveys concluded the submarine blockade, not bombing, was the decisive factor in Japan's defeat. Yet the pre-war admirals who dismissed submarines never admitted their error, quietly rewriting history to praise the weapon they once mocked. O'Kane later wrote Clear the Bridge, now required reading at submarine school, where his patrol reports remain a foundational study in aggression, initiative, and tactical brilliance. He died in 1994 at age 83, having lived to see submarines evolve into nuclear giants capable of staying submerged for months and carrying weapons that could annihilate cities, yet still operating on the same principles he embodied. Strike first, strike hard, trust your crew, and accept that aggression wins. Wars. USS Tang remains where she fell, resting in 180 feet of water at coordinates 25 degrees 25 minutes 53 seconds north, 119 degrees 56 minutes 24 seconds east, never salvaged, never formally located, a steel tomb holding the silent crew of the most successful submarine in American history. But her legacy endures in every submarine officer who studies O'Kane's relentless mastery of his craft and in the simple lessons Tang proved. Technology matters only when it works. Bureaucracy kills as surely as depth charges. Leadership beats numbers. Innovation often comes from those ignored by their superiors, and victory is bought by courage and sacrifice. The kind displayed by the 2% of the Navy who sank 30% of Japan's fleet and changed the course of the Pacific War forever.